Welcome, everybody, to Recovery Machine. My name's Nathan, joined, as always, by co-host Corey. How are you doing, co-host Corey?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Not too bad. It's looking like, it's almost looking spring-like out there.
It is.
I'm back in Kelowna, and I'm liking that. So things are good. Things are
Excellent.
trending. My boat is in the ocean. The engine is running. And we have it pointed in the direction that we're trying to get to.
Excellent. I'm very happy to hear that.
It's about the best I can do. So what are we going to, we got a couple news articles to discuss today.
Yeah, we haven't talked about the news in a little while. I can't recall when the last news segment we did was, but there happens to be quite a lot going on right now. More than we can even cover in this one segment. But the
understatement of the session.
Yeah,
we mean in a local sense too.
Yeah, in a local sense, because we could, if we panned out a little bit, we could just go on for days. But there's a lot happening locally that relates directly to the toxic drug crisis and overdose deaths. There's a lot that relates to issues of homelessness in our communities, in our province. We're gearing up here for an episode next week where we will be talking to Garth Mullins again. And it's been about a year since we had Garth on, and that's got me at least thinking about, are we better off or worse off than we were a year ago at this time? And then, as fate would have it, the news is full of stories that would maybe point us in one direction here to answer that question. But there's a lot going on.
And that's good. I mean, it's good that we're having Garth come on now. I think is a opportune time to discuss some of this stuff, because you really need somebody who's in it and seeing what's going on to give you that realistic perspective. It's very difficult to rely on. You can't really rely on the news for an accurate perspective, no matter where you look that way. Looking at these articles that we're covering today, the comments on some of these articles are just horrendous. Some of them are not, but I think there's, and this includes myself. I don't know about you, Corey, but the situation as far as homelessness is concerned is a very complex issue, and it requires a lot of critical thinking, a lot of nuanced thinking, and probably is going to take some creative ideas, or maybe something that has worked elsewhere that we're unaware of. I don't know. I spent the last little while here looking at these issues. The first one we're going to discuss is an article in which Garth Mullins is interviewed, and it's about the drug shortages surrounding methadone. And as people may know, methadone is a opiate therapy or opiate replacement type medication. So people can take one dose a day, usually, of methadone, and it's a long-acting formulation that is designed to make it so that you don't have to rely on other sources of opiates, and it prevents withdrawal symptoms. So we could start by going through this article that Garth is interviewed in, if you want, Corey.
Absolutely. Before I get into the article, I don't want to put you on the spot as a pharmacist here, but can you offer a bit of an explanation about what the difference with methadone and methadose is? Because I'm going to mention methadose here in the article, and there's a important distinction to make.
Sure. So there used to be just good old-fashioned methadone, and we mixed it up at a 1 milligram per mil dosage. That was the concentration. It was standard. You'd get it in a little bottle. It was powdered methadone that you would get like any other controlled substance in powdered form. And we would mix that with Tang. So your dose would be, if you had 100 mils of Tang, that meant you're getting 100 milligrams of methadone. Methadone is the chemical name of that drug. Methadose and Metadol D are brand names. So back in 2019, they came out with a weird idea that they were going to increase the concentration of methadose with this new formulation, which is the methadose, not the Methadone D. So the methadose formulation was, you could either get it in an unflavored, they had cherry, I think, and it was a 10 milligram per mil formulation, which I didn't understand right away because, I mean, I get the fact that some people were on, like I had a patient on 360 milliliters or 360 milligrams of methadone, which is, it's a lot, but that's what that person required. I've seen as high as 480. Around the same time as this new formulation came out that was 10 times as potent, they put a max on. They wanted physicians to only have a max dose of 100 mils or 100 milligrams of methadone. So that was something that I didn't understand, and it didn't make a lot of sense as to why you would come up with this new formulation and at the same time cap the dose.
Yeah.
Really, like, there's people have died because of that, the mix-ups with the old formulation and the new formulation. And the main problem that Garth is talking about in this article has to do with the half-life difference between these formulations. Now, the government will tell you that there's no difference between the different brands of methadose or methadone that are available. But and as a pharmacist, that's the information I was given. But what they do with these drugs that are very similar to the brand name drug, or if the brand name drug is off patent, is they'll let the drug company or the generic or whoever it is who's applying, they'll let them use the previous company's monograph. So that allows them to skip some of the pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. And I suspect that is what happened with methadose. So what we saw in practice was, all of a sudden, when we made the switch, people started complaining. And at first, many pharmacists were like, "Oh, you're just," basically people on methadone were treated like they're drug seeking, right? Like, "Oh, you're just looking for more," and they were kind of, the problem was shrugged off. But once it became apparent that there were far too many people with obvious signs of withdrawal early, the government conceded and said, "Okay, well, something's not right. We're going to get this other formulation in here, and we're going to add it to the formulary so it will be, a benefit or available for people who need it as well." So now they have Methadone D, which is available in tabs and liquid formulation. And that one, for whatever reason, is more similar to the original, where it's, for the vast majority of people, it's a 1-a-day dose. I saw patients who were trying to dose the methadose formulation 3 times a day in smaller increments. They were trying everything to get around it. But the strange thing about these types of problems, when I go online and I look at the databases, I cannot find a single study. And if there's somebody out there who can do this, please point me in the right direction. But I can't see a pharmacokinetic or a half-life study comparing the old formula of methadone to methadose or Methadone D, which is odd, because you'd think, like, why would the government, they're basically capitulating to the pressure. So they're admitting that there's something wrong. Why not do a quick study or force that drug company to do the study? Because they should have done it properly in the first place. And I bet they would find that for some metabolizers, there's some suspicion about there's certain types of liver enzymes that some people have in abundance and some people don't. Specifically, the ones called CYP2D6. If you are a CYP2D6 ultra-fast metabolizer, then, which, by the way, many opiate users are, because you tend to get a better response from opiates. You metabolize that. I suspect that they would metabolize that form of methadone faster, and that would be that's my hypothesis as to what's going on here.
Interesting.
But I can't find any evidence online to support it. I didn't look forever, but I spent too much time for not finding any answers. And it baffles me as to why they wouldn't do a quick, just do get 100 subjects who are already taking it, and just do, it wouldn't take long, right? A week of blood tests, and you'd have an answer. But for some reason, that's not a thing. So with that in mind, we can continue along here.
Yeah, thank you. That was really succinct and informative. I personally, just even as a nurse who gave methadone many, many, many times in my career, hundreds of times, I didn't know some of the distinctions there. So that's fascinating, and it's really troubling given that the other side of this whole story is this looming monster of toxic drugs that are snapping people up in a millisecond, it's not this is not without consequence. And I guess that's what the article that I will read you here is. So this was put out on March 29th by the CBC. Garth was featured on CBC radio, as he often is, and that's where the story first came to my attention, but it was also in print media here. So British Columbia has been dealing with a shortage of methadone, and for those who rely on the medication to treat opioid addiction, it's been almost a month of uncertainty. The province says it's become aware of the shortage in the first week of March after the manufacturer of Methadone D, a methadone formulation, reported a shortfall due to shipping delays.
Bullshit.
The Ministry of Health followed protocols in place for drug shortages, including additional pharmacare funding for alternatives, says the province. All current methadone liquid formulations are considered equally effective and therapeutically interchangeable, says the province. Since 2014, Garth Mullins of the Vancouver Area Network of Drug Users and the British Columbia Association of People on Opioid Maintenance has been using Methadone D. I'm alive right now because I've been able to have access to methadone, and if that access is imperiled, it is going to turn my life upside down, Mullins says. Mullins says he's heard from users who report that they have been offered other formulations known as methadose. Back in 2019, Methadone D was offered as an alternative and to those who found methadose ineffective. Mullins says, and having to go back to methadose amid a shortage has left some users feeling dope sick. You start to get the sweats, anxiety, kicky legs, and then you're throwing up, and you're just in a really bad state, he says. In that situation, most of us end up topping up off the street supply, and right now, that is lethal. The government says that as of last week, patients have access to other pharmacare-funded products beyond methadose without having to request them through a special process. The province said the methadone shortage was resolved on March 13th, but a ripple effect on the supply chain might be felt for a couple of weeks as the availability stabilizes at the wholesaler level. It added that supply levels should return to normal shortly. I'll skip forward just a little bit here. We hear the government just kind of shrugging their shoulders and saying, oh, it's the supply chain. What can we do? And that's not good enough when it's an emergency. They should make sure that there's a good stockpile of prescription opioids and that we don't see shortages. So I'm glad that you gave that kind of preamble about the differences there. And of course, like Garth is saying, the biggest concern is that people have to top up to keep themselves out of withdrawal. Mm-hmm. And for the callous listener or the callous reader of that article who says, well, then it's their own damn fault for having to, for making that choice, I would challenge that person has never experienced acute opioid withdrawal.
Yeah. And I mean, if that's the person's view on somebody who's on a chronic dose of methadone, then that there's nothing unusual about that, and that's their prerogative, right? I mean, you're free to be as compassionate or non-compassionate as you wish. For the people who do care about issues like this, I'm not sure how many people are concerned, but I guess the thing that this kind of underlines for me or highlights is the fact that the province has labeled this as an emergency. This toxic drug crisis has been labeled an emergency as of 2016, and it is still considered an emergency. And that confuses me because the definition of emergency is an urgent, unexpected, dangerous situation that poses an immediate risk to health, life, property, and environment, requiring immediate action. So what I would say, or what I would request the province consider, is that they remove the emergency status from the opioid or toxic drug crisis, or if they don't want to remove the emergency status, then treat the situation like an emergency. I don't understand the political posturing. If you're trying to get votes, if you're trying to win an election, I could understand playing those type of games. But this is people are dying. We've lost over 11,000 people now. It's the highest unexpected, or what do they call it? Accidental death, I guess, but it's not really accidental. I mean, it's lethal at a rate that warrants the title emergency.
Mm-hmm.
And yet the actions of those who are in charge of handling such things are not in line with what is required for an emergency.
Yeah, not at all.
So this is another example of, you're trying to provide what is effectively a harm reduction policy that we've had in place for a long time. There's many problems with that, with the methadone program, the way I see it as it is.
Mm-hmm.
But blaming a shortage, or this is not even this is something that could have been fixed without even considering the supply chain, because all they had to do is they have provisions in place that they can make a molecule part of the formulary overnight if there's an emergency. So this is an emergency. So all they had to do was say, okay, we're going back to the old formula. All pharmacies now order the old formula of like just the methadone that you can get, because I believe that was still available. I could be wrong there. I didn't look into that, but I didn't see any action to, in an emergency, all other forms should have been covered immediately. That should have been the first thing. And if methadose was the only thing available, then right away they should have brought in compounding material to make the old style methadone.
If this was being treated like an emergency.
If it was an emergency, and there's no way you can tell me that you can't get that molecule.
Yeah.
Because guess what? The underground is kicking your ass, BC. Do you see any shortages of fucking fentanyl?
No.
Do you see any problems with a supply chain? And imagine the difficulty, imagine the hurdles that these underground labs are facing in comparison to our pathetic government.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's shameful.
Yeah.
The fact that you can't get your harm reduction medicine, but you can get lethal street drugs because of our regulatory malfunctions.
Yeah.
What? I don't know. It's a wild one.
The supply chain, the use of that excuse is so 2020.
It's getting old, isn't it?
It's so 2020. And it's a kind of a, for the reader, for the consumer, for the person who needs, whether we're talking about methadone or something from the grocery store off the shelf, it's like a kind of an untraceable, unfollowable excuse that you have to kind of accept. Well, it's the supply chain. Okay. So whether, to me, that like conjures up an image that it's like stuck on a big sea can in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean or something like that. Like it just sort of ends there. The excuse ends there. And this is a whole other discussion we could get into about just sort of the vast disillusionment with government in these sorts of matters. But I read that and I end up thinking that they think that we're stupid. And they think that their consumers and their clients, or the people that are relying on them, are stupid. Because that's just such a lame...
Isn't the writing on the wall?
Yeah.
I mean...
It is.
We've seen what people are willing to tolerate. And this nonsense about, this last line here, it added that supply levels should return to normal shortly. Our drug supply in general for pharmaceuticals has not been normal since the Great Recession. In fact, it's been on a downhill slide, and there's numerous reasons for that, but it's all to do with mismanagement and government policy. Anybody who's experienced not being able to get penicillin in Canada, old folks out there who go in and they go to get their calcium channel blocker and it's not available. The normal is completely different than it was in, say, 2005. 2005, there were barely any drug shortages. Now you don't get there'll usually be a fairly large double-digit percentage of your basic drugs that you can't get.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, Garth definitely has, he's got a point about stockpiling. I mean, methadone is dirt cheap. So why on earth wouldn't you have that stuff ready, have it, it's got a long expiry date. You could have plus they know very close to how many people are going to need it. It's not a difficult thing to figure out.
Yeah.
Doesn't cost a lot of money, it doesn't take a lot of time to figure out. And yet the consequences of not having that ready are death, possible death. So why, I don't understand.
Hearing that from an article in March of 2023 is really discouraging. We've been talking about this for the length of our show, and other people in our province have been talking about it for a lot longer than that. And at this stage in the game, this late in the game, man, oh man, discouraging.
Discouraging indeed.